What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Pitch Please podcast. Today I've got Paige and Julie, and we're going to be talking about their company, Benny. I'm going to think of it and call it the healthy version of a Red Bull or energy drink, just to make it simple. I know they've got way more behind that, and I'm excited to learn what that means. Welcome to the show, Paige. Welcome to the show, Julie. Why don't you let our listeners learn a little bit about both of you first?
Hello. Yeah, no, so excited to be here and to be sharing more about our story and Benny.
So, from the two of you, like maybe give us a bit of background. Like, what's like, we're going to be talking about your energy beverage today, but I imagine that's not, where this journey started. So maybe give us a bit of background on like where your expertise lied. What are some of the things you did through your career, and how did that eventually pivot into entrepreneurship? Or maybe you've always been an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I can pop in. So I feel like very similar to you, Mike. I've always been very interested in startups. So my career, like it's always been anything that I can do in startups with founders I really like, with products I really like just wanted to be in that ecosystem. I always say like I think my dream jobs growing up was like a pop star and then a founder. Like I really just never really like wanted anything else, which is so fun. So I met Julie back in university, which I'm sure we'll get into, but I did my BCom at UVic in Victoria, BC, and a part of the reason why I chose to go there was because they have a really good entrepreneurship program. So that was always on my mind. And then post grad, I joined a media company. So I'd worked all through university for different startups. And then I ended up mid pandemic with lots of free time, started a podcast interviewing female founders. And from that podcast, I got found, I guess, by my big post grad big girl job, which was for a media company that I really loved growing up. So I was there for about a year and a half and I did all things marketing. It was super scrappy. So the company was kind of at like I don't even know what you call it now, like a real turnover point. So they had 4 staff left, and I was one of the 4 doing all things marketing, which was
Oh, wow.
really fun, very scrappy. I got to work all over the world. It was work from anywhere. So I worked all over Europe, which was super fun during the pandemic, but I knew I wanted to do something else. And my work knew I wanted to do something else. So Julie and I started working on Benny on the side, and I'm sure we'll dive into like how we reconnected and got into that. But I ended up getting laid off because I was spending too much time on my new business. But my boss at the time was so great about it. She was like, take the severance and do your thing. Like, I know you want to be doing something else, so this is your sign to do it. Which at the time was like gutting, obviously, for
Yeah.
like 2 hours. I was like, well, what am I gonna do? I knew what I was gonna do. So from kind of that point, I gave myself, so that was September. I gave myself up until January to really like work on this and like see if I can like make a living. I was just doing consulting before Benny really made any money to pay us. So like see if I could make it work and do it. But we'll dive into all of that,
Yeah,
I'm sure.
there's a lot here to unpack. I want to hear your
Yeah.
story too, Julie, and then I'm going to like bring these together. I think there's so
Yeah.
much to unpack there.
Yeah.
What about yourself, Julie?
Yeah. No, there's super different stories, which is funny. And even Paige and I think personalities are so different. So it's always just it's very like yin yang, which is great. It's honestly served us really well. But yeah, so I was at UVic as well. I did an economics major and a business minor. Um, and I started a plant-based food blog. I guess it would have been during COVID when everyone got into cooking and everything like that. And that was kind of my first touch into like doing my own thing, entrepreneurial world. Like I started doing partnerships, and I was always very scrappy and kind of always finding ways to like monetize things that I was doing. Like I just love doing that. Yeah, so I put a lot of love into that for a few years, and that got me into nutrition and just like healing through food and just how powerful the ingredients that you consume are. So loved that. That also definitely taught me a lot about recipe development and like dosages of stuff. So it did come in handy. I think it was like a stepping stone to Benny for sure. But yeah, I was actually in my 4th year university. So all through high school, all through university, I'd been like a dual sport athlete, and then with university as well, you're just having like 5+ coffees a day trying to keep afloat. And artificial energy drinks. If I was really desperate, I would take like caffeine pills, which is so crazy. I could never imagine doing that now. Yeah, in my fourth year university, I actually landed myself in the hospital, in and out of there for about a year with a chronic illness that nobody could pinpoint what it was. And it really wasn't until I started taking a holistic healing route and going to like naturopaths and specialists in that area that they were like, duh, it's your stress levels. Like your cortisol is through the roof. And a huge part contributing to that was like the excess caffeine and to keeping yourself in a state of fight or flight. So for me, that was like a huge pivot of just realizing like how impactful the ingredients you consume actually are, and that you can just choose a better path. So I fell in love with like matcha, green tea, and then of course yerba mate, which is now in Benny, and also adaptogens. So for those people who don't know what they are, they're superfoods and herbs that help your body adapt to stress. So they have a ton of different great benefits like focus, memory, all cognitive functions. So I started taking those in fourth year, and I got the best grades I ever got. And then this is something that Paige and I, of course, bonded over just after university, and we realized that nobody was creating an energy product or energy drinks that actually like, nourished you with these powerful ingredients. So we just brought them together. It was just like a light bulb moment. And we started recipe testing in my parents' kitchen. We also brought on a naturopath to our board, so she helped us formulate and make sure everything was like actually really efficacious. And then we launched like 8 or 9 months later in July 2023, so just over a year ago. And it's been so crazy. Like, it's great to see that it's really resonated with so many people because yeah, it's just been growing so quick. And especially like for working people, it's so great. Like great for focus, great for stable energy. Yeah. That's
There's
my
so much on
story.
both your backgrounds to unpack here. So,
Yeah.
Julie, you were like, was there like there's obviously this moment around the stress induced kind of chronic illness, but
Mhm.
before that you were kind of experimenting with like learning and in food and diet. Was that just a passion that kind of grew and flourished, or was there something that kind of sparked that bit for you and then this was like a turning point?
Yeah, well, I came from a big family and all my siblings are way younger than me, so like I kind of had to learn to cook and fend for myself a little bit kind of early. So I always like loved cooking and loved creating in that way. But yeah, just like during university, just taking better care of my body. Of course, all the sports I was doing, I was just kind of experimenting with all those types of things. I was actually vegan for like 2 years. So it started as a
I
plant-based food
literally didn't
blog.
even know that.
Yeah, no, it was crazy.
See,
And
we learn new
now,
things on the pod.
yeah, now I've gone the totally opposite spectrum. Like I realized that I was never getting enough protein, so now I'm like really focused on getting my protein. But yeah, I was always really interested into like the nutrition and the creative part of it.
Okay, and then Paige, you like this is actually pretty rare. You knew before university that you wanted to do a startup, be an entrepreneur. You actually sought out a school that has an entrepreneurship program because A, that used to barely ever exist, and now it does exist, but in super rare pockets. Like most people are like finance, accounting, or marketing. Like those are the streams that you decide your future business career based on. You knew entrepreneurship. Why? Like what was it that you knew that this was going to be for you?
Yeah, that's so interesting. No one's ever asked why. Like that is funny. Yeah, I remember so clearly like looking at different schools and seeing the entrepreneurship like specialization and then looking into classes in first year because I was obviously like I was what like 17, so like narrow-minded on like okay, they have these entrepreneurship 100 classes, that'll be perfect. But they actually were really great and we're working right now on a case study for that class because my profs have asked, and I'm like, oh my God, of course. But what was it? I think, okay, this is interesting. So I wish I was a team sports person, but I'm just not, like I can't catch a ball, can't throw a ball, could never play hockey like Julie. And I was like I did dancing and I was fine, but I always felt like I was letting the team down and I wanted to be good at something. And I think entrepreneurship, I always felt like that is like so my own like lane. Like there's no one I'm like letting down. Now I have Julie, of course, for a team sport now, but it's like very individual in that way. And I definitely grew up like in the time of like the girl boss culture. So I would have been like probably like 16 or younger, like when that book came out and like when all of those big female founders, like the Glossier era and all of those like female founders were really on the rise, so impressionable. So I was just like eating that content right up. And it was a time when founders were just starting to like be cool, and they were like my like rock stars, and they still are. I drop these founder names like they're like, I don't know, athletes. I don't barely know like musicians, but I'm like, but what about like, I don't know, Jen Atkin? I can't think of anyone. But they were always the coolest. They still are.
That's pretty cool, and it's even more interesting that you dive into it because like a couple weeks ago we released a whole discussion on like resources for female founders, and we broke into what are actual like inequities versus what are perceived, and how do others help others, and where are the gaps. So it's actually even interesting to see like what inspired you and pulled you into entrepreneurship, and it was some of the things going on in the media and some of these lighthouse examples of other successful female founders and probably just other founders generally. And it's cool to see what that was. So now there's no way that the two of you collided. I don't know. I'm actually trying to
Mhm.
figure out where it was. Like, were you both like
Mhm.
dead tired, reaching for an energy drink during university? You reached for the same can, your hands touched, and boom, Benny was
That'd
born.
be
Like, I
good.
need to understand like how you two met and brought this to fruition.
Yeah, that's so funny. Um, yeah, so I mean, like we were friends in university, not super close. Like Paige is friends with my university roommate. But we was like, I can't speak for you, but I always thought she was really cool. Like I really liked Paige, and I was like, I just had that feeling that we were gonna be friends one day. Just wasn't our time yet, I guess.
Like, you're just acquaintances at that stage.
Yeah, yeah. But that post university, I was working on like the seedling of Benny, but it was like it was a different idea even at the time. And then Paige was working on kind of like a tech startup seedling as well. And I think we just like both were kind of documenting this on our social medias, and then we just started DMing over it, and it was just like boom, 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 boom. And then I think we just collectively went with the Benny idea, altered it, and then created and launched it. It was so long ago, it feels so now. So maybe I'm missing parts.
No, that was good, but I think you're so right on. Like it's funny hearing your perspective because like she said, Mike, like we knew each other. We knew of each other, all the things. But I always like to say, like, I knew she had her food blog and you knew I had my podcast. So it was
Hmm.
kind of like we like had our eyes on each other in that way. Like we weren't just students. Like there was like something more that I always thought was very cool about you. And when we reconnected, which is so funny, like I don't remember meeting you ever. I wish I did remember. Our houses are like disgusting
Yeah,
college houses were like a stone throw away. So like
yeah.
we could have launched this years ago. But when we reconnected in the DMs, we were like immediately like it was like sparks flying. Like we would just send each other voice notes all day long of like woo-woo stuff. Like it was just like dating. It was so
You need
Yeah,
to
exciting,
like
which
create
is
startup Tinder is what I'm hearing. I think we got a new
yeah,
idea
that's
here.
so smart. No,
seriously.
I think it literally feels though, it like I feel like you do have a business soulmate in the same way that you would like a romantic one. So it's like that same kind of feeling where you're just like immediate bond. I remember I think it was like there was no turning back. It was just like as soon as we like, got the ball rolling, we were just like on the phone all day, every day. And that never stopped. Like we talk to each other more than our partners, I think.
That's so funny. So
Yeah.
I do want to talk about Benny, but I'm always curious, like the initial ideas, like the burn book. It's so funny.
Mhm.
There's like someone that I brought on. I was like one of the first podcasts ever, and I don't have a physical notebook, but like I have like I just have to put them somewhere. Like ideas just need to go somewhere, and I have like a OneNote. And this other person, their brother had this book of
Mhm.
like one day ideas, and like then they started one of them, but it sounds like you were working on something, Julie, and you were working on something
Yeah.
else yourself, Paige. What were those things? And then what sparked that first message? I feel like we're on like
Mhm.
a relationship show at this point, but it's curious
No,
because I think
totally.
people have a hard time finding their co-founders, right? And it's cool to hear what you were on and doing, what
Mhm.
brought you together, and what brought Benny to life. I think it's so important to talk
Mhm.
about.
I mean,
Yeah, so I was go ahead if you wanted to, Julie.
okay. Yeah, I'll talk about pre Benny. So Yeah, I fell in love with the adaptogens. So it was like lion's mane was a big one for me, like reishi, all those good ones. And it's in, yeah, fourth year university. And I wanted to bring them to life in just like some kind of everyday food product so that it was like something you like love and enjoy and is easy to consume, but also is incorporating these. So first for me, which Paige, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but it was pasta sauces. And this was still my college house. And I was messing around with them and like I was taking like a whole lion's mane and blending it into like mushroom pasta sauce. I did like a couple batches and they were gross. So we moved on. And then it was kind of like canned latte type thing. So like canned matcha with adaptogens, but that was already starting to be done and like done well. So it just wasn't a gap where I felt like it was like really adding a lot of value. And I think Paige, that's actually where you were like, well, duh, like let's do yerba mate. It's like the same as matcha in a way, or super similar. And then we're like, boom, makes sense.
Yeah.
That was
I
it.
feel like I honestly was gonna say, I feel like I forced your hand into yerba mate. So to answer your first question, Mike, I was working on a very, very early consumer tech. Like it was just an idea.
Okay.
I think it should exist. I get why it doesn't, but like consolidating all of your shopping into one Chrome extension, I just think that's amazing. One checkout. I love it. But I was
It'd be
like,
invented by one of the credit card companies, honestly.
it kind of needs to. That's what I've learned now. There's Locker. Christine Locker has an app called Locker that I'm obsessed with. It's kind of does what I wanted to do. So go off Locker. You carry that torch. But I was working on it and I was like pitching it, not pitching it, but like getting validation from anyone that I knew in tech. And there's a big tech investor that I knew. And I told him about it and he said, "You are not really like a tech founder, are you? You're like a CPG founder." And at the time I was like, "Yeah, you're right." And now I look back, I'm like, what the heck was that? So now I will just start a tech company out of spite. But it was when Julie and I were sparks flying. So she was telling me about her latte idea. And sometimes I do think we should have done lattes. But I really was obsessed with yerba mate, a certain brand that had a ton of sugar. And I
Hmm.
also was obsessed with adaptogens. I was like gifting everyone just like these creepy lion's mane pills. So when Julie told me about
You
her
get
idea,
an
I was like,
adaptogen. You get an adaptogen.
literally. And then I would go to my friends' houses like a month later and they hadn't touched them. And I'm like, why aren't you guys touching your weird pills I gave you? So makes sense. But I was obsessed with this yerba mate brand with a ton of sugar and I wanted it to not have a ton of sugar. So when Julie brought up the lattes, I like it was so selfish that we created it.
So did you like what like you both said that it's not like you reconnected at a house party or a bar and just it came about that you were talking about these things. Like someone reached out to someone for some reason.
So we
What
always
was that?
like I don't know who it was. Julie, I think it was me reaching out to you. I don't know, but it was one of us. So we were both posting. It was when I was working on the tech. She was
Yeah.
working on early Benny. One of us slid into the other's DMs and said like, "Are you starting a business?" Because we were doing like early like market validation, I think. Right? Is that right, Julie?
I think so. Yeah, it was in the DMs,
We need to
but
find yeah, we need to find our
yeah,
first messages.
Yeah, like is this
Scroll up.
therapeutic for you guys? Like we're going deep.
No, it's
yeah,
fun. It's fun. It's so funny. Like
I
we
know.
always say this. Like we talk literally 24/7. I'm like, what did I like who was I texting? Like my phone must have been so dry before you came around.
I know.
So you messaged back and forth. You started to like somehow arrive on this thing that you could consolidate what you were both passionate about into, which is like maybe evolving. It sounds like you were kind of springboarding off of the initial idea that Julie had, and then bringing your brand magic to it with your love for the adaptogens page, and that's how this started to come to life. When did that go from like sliding into each other's DMs to like a product called Benny?
It was all
Yeah, so it's
pretty quick.
funny. It was so quick. Probably like all within like a week or days, but ages ago, before my podcast, she doesn't even know I think how impactful she was. So before my podcast, I had no idea like starting a business seems so far-fetched, and that's really why I started my podcast, was to like meet a ton of female founders and like figure out, could I do this? But I did a call with Beth Ritchie, who was the first ever hire at Smart Sweets, which we'll get to, but very full circle now. And I just loved her story. So she was hired by Tara, first hire, really was like essentially a co-founder,
Mm,
had a good chunk of equity. And I thought like that would be a great way for me to like start a business without really starting a business. So when Julie and I were reconnecting, I first just
yeah.
wanted to do marketing and like help out and not be a co-founder. But then we talked about it for like probably like a day, another day. And I was like, actually, like I want to be your co-founder. Can I be your co-founder?
I think at first I was like, no way. I always had in my head that I wanted to be a solo founder, and I think you did too. And yeah, but then we talked it all out, and now serious props to solo founders, because I really don't think doing it alone would be enjoyable at all.
Yeah, it's hard. And
Mhm.
I mean, we're gonna talk about Benny more, but I can't imagine this was easy. Like there's a lot of dynamics here. Like forget all of the aspects of like the food and beverage industry or
Mhm.
distribution or canning or mass produce. Like D2C or direct to consumer is hard shit. Like there's not a lot of brands or startups that succeed in that space. Never mind last past like 3 months. Like it is hard. You both have chosen to do something really hard here, and it's super cool to see and super cool to hear how the story came to be, because I think that's going to be so important for what you guys are doing.
Mhm.
So maybe like let's jump off on that. Like what is Benny? um at its core, and I think we'll break down some of these things. Like you guys are dropping like yerba mate, like everyone knows what it is, so we'll talk a little bit about what all these things are, but
Yeah.
just what is Benny at its core, what makes it up, and then I want to unpack like
Mhm.
how you got this to life. I think I'm so fascinated by it all.
Mhm. No, such a good question. Um, so we used to call Benny the first nourishing energy drink without the nasties. However, we do have innovations coming that are beyond beverage. So we've recently shifted that, and now, very quick snippet, but we make energy products to allow consumers to fuel good. So those are all based off yerba mate and adaptogens. So definitely can explain what those are. So yerba mate is a type of South American tea that slow releases in your body. So you get like a very optimized jitter-free boost, which is just amazing. Like it's just sustainable all throughout the day. And it's just a gentler caffeine versus like coffee or energy drinks where you peak and crash. And then adaptogens are superfoods and herbs that help your body adapt to stress. And they do that by targeting the stress levels in your body to either bring them down or bring them up, depending like where you're falling in that realm. And then each of them all kind of have different specific outcomes too. So I genuinely think of it as like, red pill versus blue pill. Like, which effect do I want to feel today? So lion's mane, really great for focus. Reishi is amazing for immunity. We also have ginseng in them now, so that's really just good for like overall like energy and stamina. And we actually combine those three into our own in-house blend that we put in all of our products.
Interesting. And so
Yeah.
there's a different product line, so these aren't all just mixed into one beverage. It sounds like there's different beverages with a bit of a different purpose for each.
Yeah, I mean, we used to have it that way. We used to have a focus one, an immunity one, and a balance one. We actually recently made them all the same effect using the one blend, and then just a
Hmm.
different flavor choice. And that was really just like we found it was maybe difficult for consumers or a point of friction to be like, okay, I have to choose a different effect
Do I want to
and a
be
different taste.
focused, or do I want?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like even me personally, I'd be like, ooh, I really want the peach lychee flavor today, but like I want the lion's mane that's in the raspberry. So it just made it like a lot easier and quicker for consumers to make decisions. So we blended our three favorite adaptogens into our own in-house blend, and it's the same blend in every drink.
Wow. Okay. So, um, I want to, man, there's so many questions, because I think it's, you said you started making this, I think you said at your parents' house, right, Julie? Like,
Mhm.
talk to me about how you got from where you started, which is like, I'm gonna jokingly say this, like you're making like jungle juice in your parents'
Yeah.
kitchen, so now you've got like optimized flavors in cans
Yeah.
distributed somewhere, which we'll talk about, at least
Mhm.
direct to consumer, and maybe there's other spots. But can you walk me through that process of like jungle juice to
Mhm.
available to purchase and not get shut down by like Health Canada?
Yeah. That's so funny. It honestly feels like such a blur. Like it was one of those things where it was so just vague right in front of my face. Of like where am I gonna start? So it's kind of just like you have to dive in, and it's like every day was like learning something totally different. So at first, looking back, because I have photos of the very first batch I made, and it was like I went to like the TNT market and I got canned lychee and like boiled it with yerba mate leaves, and it was just like disgusting. It was so bad. And then slowly started like making more and more progress. So like I remember I actually read an entire book on the tea of history, or the history of tea, sorry. So it talks a lot about like how Nestle used to make tea and like all these companies. So I kind of like take little snippets from all these things, and like I'd watch YouTube videos on like how to make an energy drink. So that was like the very, very, very early renditions of it. But beyond that too, I honestly found the most helpful thing and that sped things up so quickly was just like researching and like LinkedIning and Googling and like finding people who did have expertise and just being super raw with them and kind of being willing to say you don't know what you don't know. And someone will have at least a portion of the answer or know somebody that will and like point you in the right direction. So I think the first person that was helpful that we connected with was a can supplier. And they actually ended up
Hmm.
connecting us with who then became our first co-packer, which didn't last very long and it like wasn't a great fit. But they did help us like get our first couple batches and like work some kinks out and realize things that didn't work. So they were helpful. And then like Flavor House, we worked with a Flavor House and they helped us develop some flavors. And then eventually, just like after a couple test runs in the facility and then like a couple production runs, we just kept making it better. And we still do. Like every run, we always are like, okay, this could be a tiny bit better. Let's tweak that. And it's just like kind of practice makes perfect, I guess.
I think
Yeah.
what's funny, you're like, yeah, Flavor House, co-packer, like these things are just like so natural, but like I don't
Yeah.
know how many like YouTube rabbit holes and Google fests you
Oh,
had to
yeah.
go down to like start to chunk it out this way. Do you feel like part of those were like your own discoveries of like, okay, we're gonna need to can this, we need to figure out who or how to can this? Do you like go just like start putting it in jars, or how do people get things canned? What's the minimum order
Mhm.
quantity to get something canned? Like, were there advisors along those, or were those a little bit of self discoveries, and then simultaneously you were building what goes in the can, and you said I think a naturopath along on that journey with you, or as an advisor in that journey, so you had like
Mhm.
product, like packaging, I guess, as one whole work stream, and like distribution, and then the actual like thing that goes in the can, which is where you started. And it sounds like it's something that tasted not so great, that maybe initially
Mhm.
you thought was going to be a pasta sauce, that now can taste like a delicious like peach or something like that.
Yeah. No, it tastes just like a fuzzy peach. That's our by far best-selling flavor now, which is funny. Um, yeah, I would say one of maybe the best parts of being young founders, and I think this is also just like a mix of like our character and personality, but was very much just like things don't have to be perfect. Like you don't need to know everything before you get your end goal or end product. So we would kind of just like give it our best shot and be like, okay, we'll just do a sample run of this and like see how it goes and learn from there. Because like you're not gonna know until you're just in it. Like you kind of just have to jump headfirst in, and that in the beginning did show us a lot of issues. Like we had cans that were blowing up. They were actually like just over fizzing and they would like explode when you open them.
Oh
But
shit.
like it quickly showed you literally right in your face what was wrong, and then you could figure out how to fix it versus like trying to, we could have never predicted that before we started ever. But yeah, so our naturopath, we brought her on board. She's amazing. She's an advisor and a big part of our team today still. But Paige actually found her and we just started connecting. But she helped us with like, I think even picking supplies. Like I would send her juice spec sheets and she would like identify the sugar content and if that was going to be an issue and like just help us dose everything, like the adaptogens and how much we should use to be effective. But yeah, maybe that's going like a little bit too specific on the product, but I hope that helps.
No, that super helps. At what point along this journey do you have to like, or maybe you don't? I don't know. Does this stuff have to get like regulated? Do you have to like, because I think that's like the biggest gap, right? Like I think
Mhm.
Paige, like what's so funny is whoever told you you can't be a tech founder, I hope you come back to them and be like, do you know how much harder it is to be the founder of a food and beverage product?
Literally, yeah.
Like the barrier to entry is like, sure, maybe the volume of things you're competing against, maybe it's a little bit less, but like the barrier to entry here is high. By the way,
Mhm.
side tangent, like there's a moment in time, I think it probably even exists now. I think this is like 15 years ago in my idea book. Like I can show you the date. And I was like, okay, why doesn't someone like take all the yummy things that you put into a smoothie, freeze it together, chop it up into ice cubes where it's already prepackaged. You drop like 6 ice cubes in, you blend it, smoothie done. And you've got like
Yeah.
the right blends already. And I think that kind of exists now somewhere.
Yeah.
But I was like, I don't even know. Like I was doing this for myself, by the way. Like just freezing cubes, put it into your like
Mhm.
Ninja and you're good to go. Just to,
Mhm.
like speed up the process. It's like, how would I get this into a grocery store? Could I sell it direct? It's frozen. How do you keep it frozen? I was
Mhm.
like, peace, this idea
No,
done.
that's so
Full
smart.
stop. You
Yeah.
guys went past there. So like how? How does that work?
Paige, I'll let you take this
I
one.
think yeah, yeah, yeah. So on the regulations question, I think actually, so Julie and I think it's a strength of being co-founders is that it's kind of like if she thinks it's a good idea, I think it's a good idea. So that's really how we started. You know, it was like she like thinks we should keep doing this, so I will. Like I'm not going to pull the plug. So you don't like have that self-doubt. But specifically on the regulation, I think like Julie was saying, we just would ask a ton of questions. We would talk to any founder we could talk to, like anyone in the
Mhm.
ecosystem, food and bev. And it was a call, and this girl asked us what we were doing about this certain regulation that she thought we would need. And we were like, oh my God, I literally never heard of this. I think we just like BS'd our way through the rest of the call and we're like, yeah, we're like totally on that. And that took us down a rabbit hole of like talking to different consultants and experts of like kind of what we would need. But it's actually like knock on wood, a lot simpler. I think people trip themselves up and it depends on the way your product is made and the ingredients that you have. I won't dive too deep into it, but it was a lot simpler, I think, than you would assume. It's like,
Mhm.
you know, pretty basic stuff. Like there's like regulations that you like look into and you can find consultants for that. And then you have obviously your insurance. But I think that too, Mike, for us, like that felt like such a huge hurdle. Like, how do you like actually commercialize something and like make it like okay? And so far, that's been actually like a
Yeah.
lot easier. I think that we would have heart attacks about that and be like, oh my God, is everything okay?
Mhm.
So far, so good.
No, for the longest time, I remember we would Google probably on a daily basis, like actually how to commercialize like a beverage formula. And it seemed like this super complex thing because I think just when you think of like doing anything government wise, it seems super complex. But eventually, I think we just kind of like started to learn the ropes. And super simply, it's either like yes or no, that ingredient is allowed in a food product in Canada. And if it's yes, okay, here's like the
Mm.
guidelines between like minimum and maximum of that ingredient you can use. And then that's it.
Uh, That I guess makes sense. Like I think it's like the mental barrier maybe is bigger
Yeah.
than the actual barrier if you put in the energy and get started on it. So let's talk about like Benny. So you've got it sounds like a few flavors. How many flavors you've made all of the different components of Benny that were originally separate product flavors. They were tied to flavors. You've taken those ingredients and they're now in
Hmm.
every flavor and you've got a few flavors. And
Yeah.
eventually you may, I don't know, you'll have to stay tuned and follow Benny. You may drift out of canned beverages. But what exists today and where is this available today?
Yeah, so like you said, when we launch, it's interesting even in such a short amount of time. So it's been like, I don't know, a year, maybe 4 months. When we first launched and when we came together, we were so passionate, and you can probably hear in this conversation about these ingredients, yerba mate and adaptogens, and that's what we would say we were launching. Like people would be like, "Yeah, so what's Benny?" And we'd be like, "Oh, of course, it's a yerba mate and adaptogen drink." Like no one knows what that means. That's ridiculous.
It sat next to the pill you gave them on their shelf.
Literally, yeah, they're like, I don't want that. So probably like a month or two in, we like yerba mate is consumed pretty regularly as like an energy drink. And I think at the time when we launched, there was like this stigma, this dirty word. We just didn't want to be like, we didn't even consider that launching, we were an energy drink. And then about a month in, we were like, you know what, this is an energy drink. Let's like lean in hard to that. And that's been a lot of fun, like building the brand in that way and like reflecting on the product in that way. Like when we think of innovation, beyond, so we're innovating beyond beverage, but even to the beverage, when we think about like new flavors, we're like, what makes sense for energy? Because right now, even like our current flavors, I don't think we would have launched with these flavors. But to answer your second question, we've got 3 SKUs, or 3 flavors: elderberry, yuzu, peach lychee, and raspberry hibiscus. And then they all have, like Julie was saying, our proprietary kind of in-house blend of adaptogens and yerba mate for really good focus. You kind of get the boost without the jitters and the crash. And we're on direct to consumer, like you've been saying, Mike, but that's probably like 20% of our business. We're
Okay.
primarily like retail and wholesale. So we're in about 500 stores across Canada, which
Wow.
has been fun. Yeah,
That like full stop. Hold on. You just like you can't just brush over. Oh, we're in. That must have been a massive leap. Like I am guessing you started direct to consumer.
So funny, actually. We definitely, this is a story of, to Julie was saying, like we very much jump before we're ready. So we started, I don't know when it would have been, probably 3 or 4 months before we were launching, like working on our Instagram and just like posting things like, I don't like vibe kind of things. And we got reached out to by 2 different kind of food accounts. So one is Snapshots, who Andrea, she's amazing, has a really big like media company around new food and bev, and she invited us to demo our product way before it was ready at Expo West, which is a really big food show in California. So that was our first time making canned product. It was so bad, no offense to us. Julie said they would just like
Yeah.
explode everywhere. It was
We
so
hand
scary. So that
labeled
was
them.
yeah, we labeled them, yeah, by hand in our scary apartment or our scary Airbnb in Venice Beach. And then from that experience, Pop Up Grocer, which is kind of like a media grocery store hybrid in New York, reached out and asked if we wanted to be a part of their summer rotation. So that was why we launched when we launched. We definitely could have taken more time in like the back end, but I'm so glad we launched when we did. Like I remember the day. So we launched on June or July, June 1st, I think, on shelves at Pop-Up Grocer. And then we launched about 2 weeks later after we got back from New York and like got ourselves together on D2C. But the day that we launched in Pop-Up Grocer, that morning, we got tagged in an Instagram story, and Julie and I were in New York to like support the opening. And we like both like cried. It was so exciting. Just like someone in the world saw it on a shelf, grabbed it. And now we're like, yeah, of course.
So interesting thing. So you started with distribution, then you went direct to consumer. That moment, maybe it was that moment, maybe it was something else, but like of this whole journey, what's been like the most standout highlight for the each of you? It could be different. Maybe it's the same thing. Maybe it's actually reminiscing on this podcast and finding out a whole bunch of things that we just uncovered today. But like, what was the highlight of this journey for each of you so far?
I think
So
something
many.
that never gets old is going into stores that like you've gone to your whole life and that are like a big normal store, and it's like craft sitting on the shelf, which like genuinely within a year before we started Benny, like I thought every food brand in the grocery store was like big box brand. Like I didn't realize that you could just go start a food brand and put it on the shelf. So it's crazy to like walk into, like we're in London Drugs now. So it's crazy to walk in there where like I've gone since I was probably 5 years old, and like it's just sitting there with all the big
Like you
brands.
famous. You
Yeah,
made
I was
it.
like I did cry. Yeah, when I went
That's
in
me.
there. Yeah. So that's always a really cool one.
So for you, Julie, it's like seeing it on the shelf. And it's almost
Mm-hmm.
this like bit of fame that you're like, I made that happen, and the pride of all the hard work into like being one of those famous brands that, as a kid or anybody actually just walks down the aisle and like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Those companies must be like massive. And now that's you.
Yeah. Very
That's so
cool.
funny, Julie, because I feel like these moments like speak to both of us and like to what we were saying, kind of our like inspo for wanting to start the brand. But my like the second you asked Mike, and maybe this is such a lame one, but really a highlight for me was and still is, we have a really, really amazing group of advisors. But one of them is Tara Bosch, the founder of Smart Suites, who I've loved Smart Suites forever, loved her forever. When we started the business, we were like immediately like, we need to get her on board somehow. And we ended up connecting through an accelerator, staying in touch for a couple months. And we did her accelerator last year. And then she came from that and asked if she could get more involved in Benny as an advisor, which was just like so humbling isn't the right word because people always say humbling. I'm like, it's the opposite of
It
humbling.
was
It
like
like boosts your
euphoric.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it was just like, oh my God, she sees
We
something
met a
in us.
celeb. For you, startup founders are celebrities. You
Exactly.
got
Yeah,
like
yeah,
your autograph and like day with, but your day with became like, hey, George Clooney invested in your tequila company kind of style, you know?
exactly. Yeah. And like it's amazing. Like we have some other really awesome founders on our advisory board too, but she's one that like I'll go to events that she's speaking at and people are like literally fangirling that she's there. And I'm like, we talk to her all the time. Like she's like really a part of
Cool.
things, which I hope she doesn't hear this because she's gonna be like, oh my God, you're obsessed with me. But that was a very like humbling moment that she saw the potential in the brand and we were like, oh my God, like we could do this too. So that was very cool.
This is like pretty cool. And I think at this point, people are probably wondering where they can find out more and or buy some Benny. I feel like I'm gonna have to like stock up some Benny and replace the coffee during my pods. But where can people get it? Obviously, there's a direct to consumer, but where else is it available?
Hmm.
And where should people go find out more? We'll put everything in like the show notes too. But for anyone that's listening at this point, like their thirst is real. Where are we sending them? Where's the thirst trap?
Yeah. So obviously on our website, drinkbenny.com, and our Instagram is drinkbenny too and TikTok. But on our website, we've got a store locator. So you can just put in your postal code. We're pretty nationwide across Canada. So hopefully if you're in Canada, you can find us. We're plugged in the States and then we're on Amazon in both Canada and the US. So that's a real good deal if you want to stock up on a bunch of Benny.
Hmm.
I literally just did it real time. So it looks like you
No.
are at the Healthy Planet near me
Yeah.
in Burlington. So
Yeah.
actually, one more trick question. Should I buy direct to consumer or should I go to Healthy Planet? Or does it not matter now that you guys are on the opposite side of this?
Oh my God, people ask all the time. Julie, what do you say? Okay, I'll let you answer. I asked.
I think there's there is more benefits for people to buy in store. It's just so important to have that turn be really high in store because like as a new brand and as young founders, like it already is really hard to get on those shelves and you have to work equally as hard to stay on those shelves and like have good sales numbers or you'll just be replaced by new innovation. So definitely goes a really long way when people go in a store and like buy a can or a few. Also.
I like that. And it's funny, I
Yeah.
asked intentionally because when I was talking to the founders of Midday Squares out of
Mm-hmm.
Montreal, Paige probably knows who they are, is on her like
Yes.
hit list.
Yeah.
I asked the same question because the assumption when you're a listener or a supporter, you're like, I should buy direct, like that must be
Mm-hmm.
the best thing. But I love how you framed it, Julie, which is like the inventory turns demonstrates your usefulness within those stores.
Mm-hmm.
And like, although D2C maybe there's marginal more margins or not, I don't know, but the idea is like you are creating a distribution channel. And
Mm-hmm.
I think like there's this saying that first time founders focus on product, second time founders focus on distribution. And like
Mm-hmm.
Ooh,
it's sort of like an
Julie.
interesting, like you realize after founding your first company, like the hardest thing to do is to get it into more people's hands. So like the
Mm-hmm.
product can be like a B or a C, but if you have A distribution, you'll win every time over an A product with like C distribution
Yeah.
because like you need to get this out to the world. And so
Yeah.
Healthy Planet, Burlington, I'm coming for you.
Yeah.
But I do have one more question, which is if I buy it, at Healthy Planet Burlington, I need like a message from both of you guys when one of your crew necks comes back into stock in a
Yeah.
large, because I want to rep that.
Yeah, they're cute.
No, of
I
course.
agree. But I'm surprised Julie and I are always wearing the merch. We're not wearing any right now.
Mine's
Yeah,
all
I've
in the
got merch
wash.
from like Double. If you're a company that's been on the pod, I'll snag your merch. So I've got like a Double hoodie or crew neck, and now I see the crew neck on your site. It's like in a sweet color, but it's sold out. So when it comes back into stock, I want to be first on that like buy this item now list. This has been a blast. I don't know. I had a ton of fun. Hopefully you both
Ew.
had like some fun going down memory lane and sharing not just like your founder Tinder story, but also like what drove that connection, how you found the right co-founder, and how you brought that to life, and some secrets of like. And Paige, please go back to that person that said you can't build a tech startup, and just like sit them down and be like, listen, we got to talk, because I don't
Literally.
think they get it. I see tech startups all day. Like I've seen it for like 13, 14 years. What you guys are doing has like nuances that are like really hard. Like maybe like a medical device is harder, but it is more challenging than the average tech startup today. And so kudos to the
Yeah.
massive
Thank you.
achievements you both have done.
Thank you.
Any final words from either of you kind of before we close out, either advice for other founders, female founders, founders in general, people with CPG? I don't know, but you guys have so much knowledge that I feel like there's something we left out.
Yeah, I feel like something that probably I got from Julie. I got most things from Julie. Is, and I think this is like speaking to that founder, Mike, that you were saying, like people like don't last the 3 months or whatever it is. The person that is like wants to start their company making smoothie ice cubes, genius. I think the biggest thing for us that I always try to remember is like you're just putting in the reps every day. If you do something positive, put in the positive momentum, like 1% every day, like that kind of mindset, you're really going to be blown away by how far you can go. Because I think, like you were asking, when we wanted to launch this business, it's so intimidating. Like, how do we get from here to Healthy Planet Burlington? But you just put in those steps every single day, and hopefully someone hears this and launches their business. Because I think that's like, even today, like so important for us to remember.
I think one of the most important things for me, and that I think we're still always learning, is like building that personal muscle is probably one of the most important things you can do. Like there are just so many people every day that think that they know your business better than you and are like telling you what to do or like critiquing you. Or maybe they've also like already built an amazing business, but it's just like only you know your why and your business and like the intricates of it. So there's been so many times like we've just had to make such hard decisions, and it would be way too hard to be listening to 100 people and their opinions. So it's just like you really just have to get so narrowed in on what you think and feel. Another part to that is like I feel like so many people start a business almost for like the external validation in a way, or like because being an entrepreneur, I think looks sometimes really glamorous, but it's really not. Not always at least, but it becomes just like so special when like you can just make decisions quickly and like know that that feels right for you and your business.
I love it. It's actually so important because everyone will tell you why you can't succeed or why you should take their opinion. But I think your purpose as a founder is to take in all of those inputs and decide on the output yourself.
Totally.
At the end of the day, those are inputs. They're not the answer. They're inputs to the answer that you have to ultimately decide. So I love that. Paige, Julie, I had a blast. No better way to kind of top off the day than filling up my energy with some Benny. This time it was virtual. Hopefully once I visit Healthy Planet, it'll be some actual Benny. But thanks again for coming on the pod, sharing your story, and getting real with our audience today. Really appreciated it.
Yeah, no,
Thanks so
you
much,
so
Mike.
much.
So fun.
All right, everybody. Have a great day, and make sure to check out the show notes for more details on Benny, and catch you guys all in the next episode. Have a good one.